How y'all doing today? Let's get this party started. We appreciate you all taking the time to come out today. This is something that we have had previously scheduled, the opportunity to have Florida East Coast and Brightline come to the community and talk a little bit about what it is that they are proposing to the community that affects our infrastructure, both over the water and across the roadways. And so this is that opportunity. I would like to invite up, this is going to be largely the FEC Brightline show to talk about what they're proposing for the community, answer questions for the community. And having spoken with them, I'm sure that if there are more questions that follow after this, that they would probably be willing to come back to the community again and answer further questions. So in that, sir, are you taking? All right, we'll give you the floor. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you for having us. We are absolutely happy to come back if there are more questions. We are trying to give as much information as possible about the investment that we're making in the community and the potential future investment that we'd like to make. So my name is Allie Soul. I'm the Vice President of Community Relations with Brightline. It's nice to see some folks in here that I've met previously. I'm joined by my teammate, Scott Gammon. Scott is our SVP of Construction. He's largely in charge of our infrastructure project from West Palm Beach to Orlando. I'm also joined by Bob Ledoux, who is Senior Vice President for the Florida East Coast Railway. Also on the Brightline team here, we have Joe Mead, who is our Director of Safety and Security. We have Lori Fucini-Joy, who is our Grants Coordinator. And then we have Mike Soleno and Henri from Hardesty and Hanover, who are the engineering team that is working with us on the potential future replacement bridge. So I'm going to kick it off, and I'm not an engineer, so I'm going to kick it over to Scott, who is for the engineering components. But the on-off button. It's David. Sorry. I do. Did I not turn it on? Perfect. Thank you. Oh, okay. Perfect. So we're here today to talk about the St. Lucie River Bridge, both the existing bridge, the improvements and enhancements that Brightline is going to do, plus the mitigation measures, and then the potential future replacement bridge that we have been studying. So about 6 months ago, David called a group of people here and invited Brightline to speak about what exists and what we could do to work together on this community project. And we really walked away from that meeting, hearing from the community that this potential future replacement bridge is of critical importance. And so we did what we said what we were going to do, which is we funded a scoping study, which is the first time that we've really put actual engineering dollars behind what is possible over the St. Lucie River Bridge. There have been many discussions about what could happen. This is actually what we believe could be engineered, designed, and then constructed. And we think that the alternative that we're going to present to you today is going to be something that the community will definitely buy into and support. So I'm going to let Scott talk about the existing components, and then we'll talk about the potential future replacement.
Good afternoon, everyone. Start with a little description of the existing structure. It's about a 1,300-foot long bridge, of course, crosses the St. Lucie River. The bascule or drawbridge span, as some people may know, it was built in the mid-20s. The approaches in the 1930s. As it stands today, in the closed position, we've got 6 feet 6 inches of vertical clearance. We've got 50 feet of horizontal clearance. It is a single track bridge. When it was reconstructed in the 30s, or when the approaches were reconstructed in the 30s, they actually reconfigured it to a center line configuration for the approaches. So they took what was a bascule leaf that was designed for 2 tracks and basically made it a single track bridge. So the leaf would support 2 tracks, but the approaches are on center line, so they will not. We did a kind of a brief vessel study as part of this work several years ago. We went back and refreshed that data and took a look at it and used it for the context of this scoping study. Our, I would call it vessel study, our light vessel study would indicate that about 22% of the vessels currently passing the bridge can pass with it in the closed position. So, which is probably nothing surprising to anybody in the room. Quick update on where we're at with that existing bridge. As part of the Phase 2 Brightline program, which goes from West Palm Beach to Orlando, we are doing a refresh of that bridge, primarily focused on reliability of the movable span. The movable span really hasn't seen any appreciable long-term maintenance since it was constructed. It's a very robust design. Things built in that era were mechanical and very heavy and very robust, so that it still works well, but we're going to do a refresh to make it more reliable so that when we increase the number of trains passing with Brightline, we have a higher confidence level in its operation. We're going to do a complete mechanical drive replacement. So basically all of the moving parts of the bridge will be replaced. We'll do a complete replacement of the electrical control system. The drive system basically is being replaced in kind. Again, very robust, very old school. Electrical control system, though, will be brought up to current standards with new technology. And we will also be doing some minor structural rehabilitation. The fact is, from a structural perspective, the bridge is in pretty good shape. So there's not a lot we have to do structurally. So this is primarily focused on reliability and addition of a monitor house so that we can have a full-time monitor when we go into service. There are some mitigation measures that will be put into place when Brightline begins to operate. The bridge will be integrated into our bridge application. Some of you may be aware of it. It works on the new river bridge now. This will be added to it as well to give real-time data on train passage and such. Be a lot of outreach that goes on with marinas and mariners so that folks know what's going on, what to expect. And as I just mentioned a moment ago, we are installing a monitor house and we'll have a monitor present at all times, not to operate the bridge per se. They can operate it, but more to provide a communication between train dispatch and the marine community. So that's the refresh. Allie kind of introduced this earlier. There had been a lot of talk over the past few years about, what could be done with this bridge. A lot of, here's how much it could be raised. We don't think it could be raised enough, this, that, and the other. So, but there'd really never been any real engineering study done on what the art of the possible was here. So Brightline undertook the effort of doing a scoping study, we called it. We started that first week of last October. Purpose of the scoping study was to take a broad look at the bridge and its environment and identify what we thought probable alternatives were. We had hoped to isolate a preliminary preferred alternative, but weren't sure what we were going to see when we got into the study, and do enough engineering to understand within the accuracy of a scoping study, what the parameters we could expect from the replacement. The way we started that with our consultant, Hardesty in Hanover, who Allie introduced, was we sat down for an afternoon and developed a list of criteria that we wanted to achieve with the potential of a replacement project. Things like, number one, we want to maximize to the extent possible the closed vertical clearance. We want to improve the horizontal clearances to meet the existing condition, which is on the Roosevelt Bridge, 90 feet. We don't want to interrupt the crossings north and south, I think St. Lucie south and Fern north. So we basically put this list of criteria down, and then, got out the whiteboard basically, and Hardesty and Hanover went through and developed what the potential alternatives were for replacement. We ended up really with 4 alternatives that we evaluated. Does this thing have a laser pointer on it? Yes. At the top. Anybody know where the button is? Okay, here. We identified 4 alternatives that were advanced into study, and what we did after identifying the alternatives were we took a number of metrics. I think there were 11 associated with each of these 4 alternatives. We quantified that metric and scored them so that we basically came up with ultimate score for each of the 4 alternatives. And just quickly, alternative 1, which I'll talk about in a lot more detail, is a off-alignment bridge, new bridge, double track to the west of the existing. Alternative 2 is same situation as alternative 1, except offset to the east. Alternative 3 was an alignment that was to some degree on the existing. So that would have required stage construction in order to maintain continued rail traffic. And then alternative 4 was a passenger-only alignment that basically followed alternative 1, but had better geometry, because if you do passenger only, we can climb higher grades and handle steeper curves. So those were the 4 alternatives. We scored them. There was a clear winner, quite significant margin, of alternative 1. I think our score was like 86 points out of 110. The next closest, I think, was 66. And alternative 1, as I said, is a shift in alignment to the west. We met our criteria on the south side at St. Lucie. No change to the St. Lucie crossing. It's in exactly the same location as it is today, both horizontally and vertically. No changes to the profile. We start to diverge to the west and slide under the existing, what we call the new Roosevelt Bridge. We did take advantage of a bit of vertical clearance there. Right now, the clearance as measured under the bridge from top of rail is about 29 feet. So that provides a little opportunity to increase the profile and start to increase the clearance to navigation. Come across the river with a combination of fixed spans and a movable span, just like exists today. And then we land on the north between Old Roosevelt and the existing bridge and get ourselves back onto alignment. Fern Street, which is the first crossing to the north, is also unchanged. We're able to accomplish this profile without messing with the profile at Fern Street. A couple of things that are worth noting in the plan view here. Number 1, and I should have said this earlier, just to give you a sense. So Old Roosevelt Bridge has a horizontal opening of 80 feet, has a vertical opening from mean high water in the closed position of 14. Existing us, which I have said, but just to say it again for context, we're 6.5 feet closed, 50 feet horizontal. And then the new Roosevelt is 90 feet horizontal and 65 feet vertical. We were able to accomplish with alternative 1, and this is based on a number of assumptions. The bridge still has to be designed, but it gives us a good proximate view of what can be accomplished. We're able to achieve a 90-foot horizontal opening here, so it matches the new Roosevelt. We're able to achieve 16 feet from mean high water when the bridge is closed. And maybe as importantly here is the shift to the west allowed us to square the bridge up with the sailing line, so that there's an odd jog in here for the people who have boated through here. We're actually able to line up all 3 bridges with the wider horizontal opening. So as you can see, you've got a nice straight sailing line through all three bridges. Of course, the old Roosevelt would then become the slight horizontal bottleneck at 80 feet, just 10 feet difference, but we have a centered up sailing line. This is a rendering. This work was based on a single leaf bascule. We did a quick evaluation of structure types that would optimize the vertical clearance under the bridge. You know, different structure types have different structure depths. We've got a single leaf bascule here, which is the same design as exists today. It will be, you know, somewhat different in terms of the structure, but it would be a single leaf trunnion. And this gives you a visual of the differential between the existing closed bridge clearances, 6 feet 6 vertical, 50 feet horizontal, red, and 16 feet vertical, 90 feet horizontal in yellow. So as you can see, it's a rather dramatic improvement in the closed geometry. Oh, yeah, I guess sometimes I jump too far ahead here. In this scenario, of course, the old bridge would be demolished. We would first construct the new bridge offline. One of our key, and in fact, it was one of the score elements in our evaluation matrix, was risk to the existing bridge during construction. You know, one of the circumstances you face when you replace a bridge of this era is the effect that you have on the existing structure when you build something in its proximity. It's a relatively common occurrence if you're too close, doing too much, that you would actually do things that are detrimental to the bridge, start it settling. We've actually had that happen at Rio in the Phase 2 project. So, you know, we're very careful to come up with a solution that can be constructed without compromising the existing bridge. And where I was going is, after the new bridge is constructed, there would be some very short, like round-the-clock track windows to make track swings to get traffic on the new structure, and then the old bridge would be demolished. So next steps, you know, we're seeking funding alternatives as we speak. We're working on various grant applications and making plans for how we would put both the you know, potential grant and private money together to get enough put together to execute this project. We would like to start engineering and permitting relatively soon, and then of course do final design, put it out to bid, and get it built. Any questions?
Appreciate it. We're going to open it up to questions for them. There is a special session going on in Tallahassee right now. Representatives from Tallahassee, we're going to give them the floor first since they're online. Those of them that have questions, are you handling that, Paul?
Yes, sir.
Great. I'll let you call on whomever from Tallahassee.
Yeah, we do have one, which is Gail Carroll. She should be able to speak now. It's kind of
So, State Senator Gail Harrell.
She's saying she's on, so.
If it doesn't work, I'll just call her on the phone and put the phone up to her.
She should be able to hear us right now. Give her a call.
See if she can
Senator Harrell, if you can hear us, you can unmute your microphone.
It's probably something like that. Or she just doesn't want to take my call.
Senator Harrell, can you hear us?
So we can circle back to them.
You have John or Toby? Did they want to?
John's actually speaking on the floor right now.
Okay. So I guess if we get Gail to come back to this, then we'll come back to Gail and we'll hold everybody up here. So again, they came here to answer questions for the community, what you might have questions on, whether the engineering, the design, the funding, anything that you're interested in, the schedules. This is an opportunity for you to speak to them and present that. If you don't mind, just stand up, present your question loudly, or if you want to come up and use this microphone and present your question loudly, I won't stand in your way so that everybody can hear you, and they'll do their best to answer your questions.
Richard Pinsky, on behalf of Brightline Safe Harbor. I just want to understand, this is fantastic, looks great. You said you're going to be able to turn better and elevate faster. So is the idea for some period of time, it'll be just passenger and simultaneously freight will be running for some period of time? Or as soon as the new is done, we're dismantling the old? What's the transition?
No, I may have confused you on that point. There were 4 alternatives. Alternatives 1, 2, and 3 are a bridge that is combined freight and passenger. Obviously, the preferred alternative is alternative 1, which is combined freight and passenger. So it would be a situation where freight and passenger continue to run on the existing structure until the new one is done, and then it would be a transfer of both. There was an alternative that was evaluated that is a passenger-only bridge that took advantage of the better geometrics, but it did not score very well for a lot of reasons. So that's out there as an alternative, but it's, I think, a long way from a, preferred alternative.
I have a follow-up question, perhaps for the Congressman. On the funding, obviously there's some grant opportunity, but also there's federal rail infrastructure. What is the prospect of local, state, federal? How would you envision funding metrically?
They could probably give you a better idea of the exact numbers of what they would speculate for cost. There is a federal grant that the window for that would be coming up pretty close to right now. That grant request has not yet been made. It's not a guarantee that it is put forward, but there's a good likelihood. Likewise, there would be a grant request at the state level and then a buy-in from them as well. And so as those requests come through, we'll look at moving those requests through. And then if I could give you one follow-up to his question, then Scott, we'll go to you next since you're standing up there. If you could also just mention what you're looking at for the amount of traffic, the amount of freight routes that we have coming through here, the amount ultimately of Brightline routes that would come through here, and just include that there are some maintenance routes that include, just so everybody's aware of that as well.
Well, right now, we see an average in a 24-hour period of, say, 12 to 14 freights. Once we open Brightline service, we haven't established our opening service schedule yet, but I would expect somewhere, say, 28 to 32 trains a day for Brightline. So, and those two would be additive in a 24-hour period.
The question I had is, obviously, you know the speed at which the existing bridge operates. Is the new bridge going to operate quicker as far as physically open and close?
Not a lot. I think there's some misconception that the bridge may be slow and it would speed things up if it were a little faster. But the fact is, the bridge opening and closing itself is a minute and a half or so. That's really a tiny, tiny piece of the time that it takes. You know, we've got to put the bridge down enough in advance that we can get a clear signal for a train coming through. And it's really all the more global things that add up to the closure time than it is the time that it actually takes to go up and down. We are speeding them up just ever so slightly, just better technology, newer gear reducers, newer motors. But it's, you know, we're finding a minute and a half period, so it's not very material to how much time it takes.
Could you state that rough closure time for everybody?
15 minutes, plus or minus.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Michael Kennedy, I'm from Range Street in Palm Beach County. We went through this in Waxahachie, and we did a study. We found out 88 to 90% of our folks could get under the enhanced bridge.
Yeah.
At 14 feet and the 90 feet, do you have a study yet on what that will do?
Yeah. I thought I mentioned it, maybe I failed to. We've done a preliminary vessel study here. Actually, we collected data a couple years ago that were used for some other purposes, and we went back and reevaluated that data. Right now, with the 6.5 feet vertical, our study shows that we pass about 22% of the existing vessels. With the improved vertical clearance to 16 feet, we would pass about 92%. So it would be a rather significant increase of about 70%.
Where I live, I would probably put 80% of people might go crazy. My next question is, with a monitor, would that obviate the need to have this sensor? I know you have a sensor there, if the bridge starts down, just open away, either halts the process or resets it. Would the monitor do away with that?
No, because the bridge is actually, the monitor is truly just a monitor. They are able in an emergency situation to operate the bridge manually, but the bridge is actually operated remotely by dispatch in Jacksonville. So we still need, you know, the presence monitor for vessels when they start the closure.
And last question.
To answer your question on the sensor, the
Yes,
sensor's to protect the bridge, because you don't want to go down on a boat.
Like
and
what
damage the
happened in
bridge.
Jupiter.
Yeah, so it's really to make sure the bridge will go back up.
Right.
And so if somebody decides to race and doesn't make it, the bridge will see them on a sensor and it's got to go. So that's what it's
It increases the time.
It will increase the time, yes.
So the app, you call it a Brightline app, but I'm assuming FEC.
Bridge app.
Yeah. Very good. And I would say it looks good in Waxahachie so far, so.
We've got a lot of good feedback on a lot of things at Loxahatchee we learned. In fact, I came straight from there. If anybody lives in that vicinity, we just did the bascule change-out this past weekend. So we've been working around the clock since Saturday. Had a very successful change-out. But we've got a lot of good feedback on the number of things we've done there, both temporary and permanent. We instituted an automated text system to let people know what's happening with openings to navigation. Got a lot of good feedback about that. So we've learned a lot of lessons, and we understand the value of communication with the marine community and you know, how that can benefit both sides.
Could you share with them if your timeline for grants, federal, state, design, engineering, how long this would potentially take to get to completion?
Sure. You know, we're targeting, you know, again, this is based on a scoping study, so we don't have all the answers. We've got a lot of them. We think this is about a 2-year design and permitting process, followed by about 30 months of construction. And I think probably construction is just slightly conservative. Frankly, will depend a lot on the state of our economy at the time. Right now, commodities are very difficult to get a hold of: microchips, concrete, steel, that sort of thing. So, you know, about 5 years, start to finish, incrementally financed. You know, we're working with FEC to pursue a SIS grant at the moment that would help with the design costs. That would start obviously much earlier. So if all of the puzzle pieces fell into place at the right time, it could be about a 5-year job.
Congressman, thanks. And Phil Purcell from Regent Street, South Florida, so you guys know, New River Bridge, pretty intimate on this. So the Coast Guard ray, know there'll be 32 trains, 14 freight. What
I think a lot of people know, this is something I've talked about a lot. And this is something that we worked on years in advance. In 2017, I commissioned the Coast Guard to do a bridge study exactly for this reason, in anticipation of Brightline, or maybe even at that time it was called, I think it was called All Aboard back at that time. They were going to be coming through with X number of routes. And we said, Coast Guard, this has to be fair. Water has the right of way. How do we make sure that there, at minimum is a balance between the time for whether commercial or recreational users, anybody that wants to pass through there or not. Coast Guard right now is in the process of looking at that study that they put forward. That they completed maybe in 2018. They completed it. The recommendations that they made at that time, and to give you a quote from the Coast Guard, I don't want to speak for them at all right now, but to give you a quote from the conversations I've had, they said, look, boating in Florida has become more popular, and the population in Florida has increased, and so where they see absolutely the need to have a balance of, in my opinion, 50-50, something like that, for water and rail traffic, it needs to be evaluated under that lens as well. That even since that study was completed, of which we had something like, do you remember, 3,800 or 5,800 community responses? It was a tremendous amount of input that the community came out and did, that they may look at it even a little bit further just to see what does that balance have to be. I will assure you that I will be in every single one of those conversations with the Coast Guard to make sure that there is an appropriate balance. So.
There's a comment period open now on that.
So.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Marine Industry Association for Florida, and I don't want to keep you here longer than you need to be, and thank you for coming, and this is important for the entire state. This is a very important waterway statewide. It's also a hurricane hole for this community and all of our communities to the west part of the state. So are there things in line to make sure that we'll have that access during our most critical time when we need that evacuation periods for our waterways?
So public safety, and this is something that they can address as well. Just before this meeting occurred, we were having a meeting in the back there with a number of public safety officials, law enforcement from state, local, federal, talking about things that need to be addressed, how these things have been addressed in other places. Obviously, if you've seen one port, you've seen one port. They're all different, right? We have CBP in one place, and we have city police in another place, and county sheriffs in another place. They're different everywhere. So they will have to address those things. They're willing to look at them and address them from this conversation, just the most baseline level that they were doing to address that level of public safety. And I only say this to say, anything that's related to public safety, I do have a firm belief that they will work to address, whether it's a hurricane evacuation route or dealing with 4th of July and everybody that's going to be on the waterfront here on 4th of July and trying to meet that balance, all right? Obviously, there's going to be a different balance on the waterway for Memorial Day weekend, right? Those are things that it's important for us to have these conversations with so that we do measure each other's expectations and end up coming away with a deal that's good for both sides.
Well, I want you to know we really appreciate you understanding all those aspects, and I think the plan that's laid out is so much better than what we initially were looking at, and we do want to help help you get us the best infrastructure we can get in this area, because we know we're going to be dealing with it for a long time. So thank you for your time, and anything I can do to help get all the public safety issues and all that on the table too, so we can overcome them and make sure we have the best infrastructure in place. That is our goal. So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. I don't think I think of everything. I don't want to speak for them and say they don't think of everything, but I will. And, but maybe together we can all try to think of everything and try to address this in the best way we can. And just to put one more fine point on that conversation, they ended up coming away with a phone number for all of our local law enforcement saying, this is the emergency number. If you have to get from one side to the other, you'll be able to do it in this way. Call this number, and the bridge will be up in X number of minutes. The point I'm making is there is an ability to address issues if issues are brought up. If they're not brought up, then it becomes a little bit more difficult to address something. So.
We want to help you address it. Thank you.
I don't know if anybody else has. Yes, ma'am.
Could I add one minor thing to the comment? and you've been part of previous discussions where we talked about the rehabilitation and the need for a closure to navigation for the upgrade of the mechanical system. That will be outside hurricane season, so that won't be a concern if that's part of where you were.
You've been listening, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, we heard you. Yeah, we did.
I have two that I think are related. I'm wondering, which I'm sure you have the answers to this, environmental concerns, and is it possible to use the old bridge that you demolished as artificial reefs?
One at a time. With the scoping study, we actually performed what we called a desktop environmental analysis, just kind of an informal checklist. I think we had 22 environmental resource categories that we took a look at. Henri and Mike, correct me, I think of the 22 categories, I think 18 or 19 were no impact. There were 3 that were impacts that could be mitigated, and the 3 from recollection were historical preservation, water quality. There'd be, short term, which will be mitigated, and what was the third?
There's some benefit resources, riverine resources that
Yeah.
obviously have to look at, but they're all very non-riverine.
Again,
Pardon me, interrupted. The senator came out of committee and is on the phone.
I have Gail. I don't know if Gail can hear me on the microphone, but Gail, if you're there, we're happy to hear from you.
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Sure can, Senator Harrell.
Yes, thank you very much. I unmuted, and maybe this is better than making that phone call. I've heard so many constituents with serious concerns about the numbers of trains and the length of period of time. From what I've just heard, it sounds like 28 passenger trains a day and 12 to 15 freight trains per day. And we're talking over 40 trains per day, average of total amount of how much time for that closure. And you said more than the 2 minutes because you've got the before and the after. So if you say 10 minutes per and you've got at least 40, that is a significant amount of time. Are we at some point going to have a true evaluation of that?
yeah, we make evaluation of that. We haven't set our final schedule, as I mentioned earlier, but as part of evaluating our schedules and establishing a final, we run what's called rail traffic control, or RTC modeling, which is the railroad equivalent of traffic modeling. And there are a lot of variables there, like can multiple trains pass on the same closure? Because most of the time in the closure is the approach. If it's down, can you get a couple of trains to pass? So it's not a linear thing where you can just divide the number or multiply the number of closures by an average closure duration. But that's ongoing. We haven't set a schedule yet. Therefore, we haven't got final answers on that, but that is being evaluated.
From a constituent point of view and what we hear, people are extremely concerned about, especially given that the 28 passenger trains would most likely be running during the daytime when people are seeking to go via boat traffic underneath the bridge. And also then there's the other concern when you mention you're looking for state funding. Certainly, I don't, normally railroad endeavors are federal. Why would you be looking for state funding on this?
There's actually a state program for projects like this called the Strategic Intermodal, what's it called, Lori? Systems.
And that is for roads, airports, and normally airports and seaports. It's not normally for trains.
You'll all look at me. Senator, there is a part of the provisions that we.
He's going to have to use a mic.
Gail, can you hear somebody speaking without the mic?
No, if they would approach the microphone,
Hold on
it would
one
be very
second,
helpful.
Gail.
Yeah, Gail, it's nice to meet you. I'm Bob Ledoux of the Florida East Coast Railway. We work closely with the Florida Department of Transportation's Rail Division. There's some money clearly not anywhere near the road and highway money that is set aside for the rail sector to improve choke points, increase capacity, and improve overall rail infrastructure in Florida so that we're a robust industry to move freight here. That funding is administered by the Florida Department of Transportation and requires us, the railroads, to match that money, meaning we have to put up some of our own money. It's not just all given to us. In addition, they do go through a very thorough public benefit analysis of those funds and make sure that the public is in fact receiving a benefit for any funds that they allocate or contribute to a rail project.
Yes, I'm aware that there is, that normally the majority of the money goes for roads. There is a very specific allocation for airports and seaports. I will specifically look into what there is in the area of trains. I am chairman of transportation, so I do have some insight into and say about where that goes. It's concerning, and certainly the match would have to be your match, not federal match, in order to qualify. That is normally how things work.
That's
So
correct.
I would be interested in hearing, what are you looking for?
We haven't finished the analysis of the phases of what money's needed up front. The SIS program for the rail 5-year plan, it ranges anywhere from $10 million a year for all the 13 railroads in Florida to about 30.
Yes.
You know, and so it's not a huge bucket in the $12 billion FDOT budget. We haven't determined yet what the SIS ask is. It would be not until next year's fiscal year budget, and we don't even know if they even have it available for next year. So, but if we don't put it in the work plan and make the request soon, then it doesn't show up at all. So that's one of the things we're looking to work with FDOT to make sure that some kind of money gets potentially put in the work plan so we're available to help leverage not only the private sector money, and of course, Congressman, thanks to the federal transportation, but money that's available, and potentially a little bit of state money to make this project a go for everybody to afford it.
Well, certainly the SIMS money is, for the most part, spoken for at least 5 years out. So what is your time frame?
FDOT has asked us to update them in the next couple of months for the next year, for the future plans, and make our list of potential rail projects that we would be looking for assistance from the state. So we will be submitting something soon to them. So, and then we defer to them. We don't determine where it goes in their 5-year plan. And we'll be glad to sit down with you, Senator, and brief you on where we are on that.
Yes, I would very much appreciate that.
Be glad to do that. While I'm up here, I guess, Senator, any other questions for me?
Well, I think there is concern among our constituents, especially those living on the west side of the bridge, and with the impact of that many closures on property values is significant. And there is the safety concern as well for access to the hospital for those who live on the wrong side of the tracks. And we want to make sure that that schedule is as available as possible to people so they can evaluate it. And I don't know, what is your time frame for that?
I'll have to turn it to Brightline to answer the timing of the schedule.
Oh, you're talking the timing of our train schedule?
The timing, when you will have a better idea. You said you're doing some modeling, so a better idea of how many trains a day, times of day, how many closures per day, and what are you looking at? Is the bridge going to be open 15 minutes an hour for the, say, 10, 15 hours that are really the hours, the daylight hours that people would be most concerned about it?
Senator, this is Allie Soul. We will be happy to continue to come back to the community as we finalize our schedule. But as Scott said, we can definitely, when we launch operations, there will be 28 to 32 trains operating from Miami to Orlando, and there are 12 to 14 freight trains that operate today. So that is the amount of train traffic that was studied in the 5-year environmental process that Brightline went through, and that is, again, what we will open with. If we open with 28, we will then go up to 32, but we will come back to the community with that information and keep everybody posted. As it relates to Brightline crossing, crossing the tracks. Brightline trains are 500 feet. They cross the railroad crossing in less than a minute. It's actually about 45 seconds for the entire cycle to occur. So in South Florida, we really are not seeing any kind of traffic backed up or any kind of people who are not being able to get from one side of the track to the other. Again, the investments that we're making in the infrastructure are in the several $billion. So people in South Florida are actually seeing that the crossings are working more fluidly with the positive train control and the new signal system and the upgrade infrastructure that we've done, and that will be seen here in the Treasure Coast as we are making the same type of investment.
Crossings, road crossings are quite different than bridge openings and closings. Is there a comparison of time that there would be a blockage on bridge openings and closings, blockage of the waterway?
Well, as we said, each opening and closure for the bridge takes about 15 minutes, and we're looking at our schedule on how we can, again, if there's one closure, if there are 2 trains in the vicinity, how they can cross the bridge in that same closure period. So as we finalize that information, we'll come back to the community and share it.
And are you talking about 28 to 32 total trains or 28 to 30 passenger trains plus 12 freight trains?
28 to 32 Brightline trains and 12 to 14 freight trains.
So we're talking about 40 trains.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think that's all the questions. I very much look forward to having an update and a schedule of what that looks like and the amount of time of blockage of the waterway as well as the roadway for ambulances and people crossing the roadway. So, this is certainly of great concern to our community. So I appreciate your being there today to answer these questions, and I'm sure the community will have further questions. And keeping us up to date of this is extremely important. And thank you for participating today.
Thank you, Senator Harrell. Is there another question in the room from anybody?
Congressman.
We got sidetracked. Yeah, sure. Artificial reefs are definitely an opportunity. There are elements of the bridge demolition that would be very useful for that. The piling, probably some of the spans. So that's absolutely on the table.
Congressman, I have a couple questions unless Representative Overdorf or Snyder are online. Allie, can you come up to the microphone, I guess? Can you give us a situation of where Brightline stands now, currently, and what the plans are as we move into 2023 with the number of trains proposed? Are they the same as the numbers you just gave?
In terms of operations?
With or without a new bridge, are we still looking at my residents and citizens here, 12 to, what was that, 18 or 14 freight trains and plus or minus 30 Brightline trains?
That is correct.
So nothing about the bridge is going to change the number of trains that'll be coming through my town?
That is correct.
Okay.
Which, Mayor, is why we are focused on the rehabilitation and the mitigation measures before, obviously, you can't build a new bridge in a year. And that's why we came, when you and David called us here last year, we came and spoke with the residents and community, and we're back again. So we're, committed to moving this forward with the community's support.
So be safe to say one of the biggest differences is instead of having 22% of boat traffic, including public safety traffic, whether it's Coast Guard, Customs and Border Patrol, or our officers going through, we'd be bumping that number up to 90%, plus the potential, once you do your modeling, of having, instead of one track going over the river, 2, So we could look forward to your modeling showing that more trains could pass in any one closure period.
Well, I think that so the answer is yes. I mean, with a double tracked bridge, right, it obviously means that trains don't have to slow down as they approach, as they would with a single tracked bridge. They could cross the bridge at the same time. We just reinstated the double track at the Loxahatchee Bridge, and if we built a new bridge, we would have a double track bridge here, just like we do also at the New River.
So from the residents I'm talking to, and a lot of the conversations I have with them, that's if Brightline has to come from a public safety perspective or from a marine perspective, if Brightline has to be here, then every agency, especially including Brightline, needs to do everything we can to lessen the burden that's currently there and to get us a new bridge as fast as possible, especially for those in the room from the marine industry. And so I know the city is currently having talks about the land and adjusting where that bridge would be. And I was wondering, I did have a question for your engineer on the span currently between the old Roosevelt Drawbridge and the north and south distance between that and the current rail bridge, and how much closer that bridge would shift. Are we talking, 50 feet from the traffic on the old Roosevelt Bridge, or are we talking 500 feet? Do you have those
Well,
numbers?
There's only about 200 feet between the bridges, so it's not 500. You can, I guess, I don't have this in scale, but you can see this is about 200 feet. Probably it's over 100, right? It's a little over half, 120 feet. Is that the dimension you're looking for?
Yeah, so we'd be basically cutting that distance in half. And then on the downtown Stewart side, it would be, looks like significantly closer if this is in scale?
Well, it is scale, I just don't, there's not a scale on here.
Okay.
I guess I'm not catching your question quite.
I'm just trying to get an idea of how close those trains will be running to the pedestrians coming across the old Roosevelt Bridge on either side, or car traffic, and just to get an idea for everyone in the room, how much closer that will be to that bridge.
This is roughly 200 feet. That's a little over half, so it probably got closer by 80 feet maybe.
Okay.
You can kind of orient yourself. This is an air photo, so it's correct.
Yep.
So here's the remnant of that construction that was abandoned. And you can see here, we're probably 70 or 80 feet from it.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it.
Thank you, Mast, very much. Letting us all be here. I'm here for about 40 or 50 people who are concerned about motor safety. And I guess the question boils down to, you're pursuing the grants, you're pursuing the funding. It can't be built in a year, we talked about that, you mentioned that. But what happens in 4 years when all this falls through? What's your game plan? And
is sound. It undergoes an annual inspection. Appearances aren't structural evaluations. Does it look ugly? Maybe. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But it is sound. It rates every year for what we need it to rate for. In terms of the future, if funding doesn't materialize, I guess, to be honest, maybe Ally, you're better to answer this.
Yeah, I would say, so I'd say a couple of things. The first thing is, I think us coming, being asked to come by the mayor and by David last year, asking us to move this initiative forward. What could we do to move it forward, knowing that there is federal infrastructure dollars that are available, right? We set out on this path to fund the scoping study to move this process forward as expeditiously as possible. So we are committed to working through every avenue to seek state and federal grant dollars, as well as Brightline contributing its own dollars as part of this replacement project. We have to have the community support and buy-in for projects of these magnitude, obviously, to be eligible and even competitive for these grants. So I think people being here and supporting that is of extreme importance. And we're committed to moving the process forward and to putting forth a project. That's why our grants coordinator is here. She's the one who works on these grant applications on behalf of us. So we are here working to make that possible in every step of the way. And obviously, Scott and I are not, we don't judge who gets those federal applications. But again, projects with strong support and that show a benefit for both the community and from an economic standpoint and a transportation standpoint are the ones that are getting moved forward. So we're hopeful that this will be one of them.
So, again, no one, hi, NSC.
Hi, Phil.
And so, what you can have is a deviation that the congressman can arrange with the Coast Guard under the current conditions, with the trains are gonna run over if the trip bridge never got built, which again has to be over 50% or at least 50% for the voters. And so then it's a predictable schedule, a predictable amount of time that the train will have to keep to until the new bridge. And obviously the new bridge is the best, but in the interim, over this 5-year period, the Coast Guard's actually control over that bridge, what goes up and down.
One thing I might,
It is my opinion that there should be at least 50% between the trains and between the waterway users. I believe, be speaking accurately to say the tracks have the right of way over the city streets. Is that largely correct? Because the tracks were there most of the time before the city streets, so they have that right of way. Just as that is the truth in most cases, God put the waterways here first, and the waterways have the right of way. And I believe that we should have at least 50% for this to be a good partnership. I will be fighting for that. I've been fighting for that already. The Coast Guard is not yet committed to that. If somebody in this community believes that that should be the case, somebody should voice that to the Coast Guard, in my opinion, of what this should be. And again, for us to, we're stuck with each other. I don't mean to say that in a bad way, but we're with each other because of where this is. So bear in mind in this conversation, whether there's a bridge or not, if the bridge is in 5 years, you're still talking about right now several years of 12 to 14 freight routes a day, a couple of maintenance trucks a day, and 20 to 36 high-speed routes a day, as was mentioned before, each taking somewhere around 14 or 15 minutes. That relationship has to be worked through with the Coast Guard, our waterway, and FEC and Brightline, and people should be prepared to be engaged about what they would want that relationship to be in order to be fair and just to this community. It is not set at this point, but there will be input for that, and that is important. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I think we have a very beautiful community here, and we like to keep our community very beautiful here. So hopefully we can find common ground on what beauty is as well. Is there another question?
I just had a quick follow-up, Dan from Indiantown Marine Center. About with the double track, they said 2 trains could pass. So I know that the speed on that corner there is somewhat of a concern, and the trains have to go slower. So even though there's 2 trains on there, is that going to change the speed? And with the double tracks, where if a train is going over the single track and then the train is up the track and is waiting for the other one to come down, does this double track completely remove that then, or is there still going to be a waiting time where a train has to go completely over, go through the curbs, and then the other one will come down while that bridge is down, or does that remove that?
No, with a double track bridge, as we've shown here, either track can be used either direction anytime without respect to the other. So there can be this, there can be this, there can be this, right? So to answer your other question, and in fact, this is one of the scoring metrics in the evaluation matrix was trying to improve the track speed on that curve that you talk about. You're all right, we're speed restricted on the north end of the bridge, and alternative 1 actually improves the track speed a little bit. I don't remember the number, maybe it gets us up to 45 passenger, 40, where we're 25 now. So it's a little bit, but all those things add up. And this was actually the alternative that had the best improvement to track geometry to increase speeds north of the bridge. That answer your question?
Well, I just wondered if it would eliminate that, the bridge having to stay down for that waiting train that's further up. You know, there's kind of a delay, right? If there's a train waiting not on the single track, and then the train goes through, and then that one can clear, does that completely eliminate that? Or is there still going to be, say, a train up there when one train goes over and another train comes down, and another one has to come through yet? I mean, how many trains are going to go over on an opening? I guess is the...
That's kind of an RTC thing, and I'll just be honest, RTC modeling is not my area, and I don't have a great sense for it. That's really what has to be determined through that. My guess, I mean, you're not going to have, if it's double track, you're not going to have a train waiting. This is basically, I think it's about a mile of single track through here when we finish phase 2. So when we finish phase 2, this will be the only single track piece between Miami and Cocoa. And there will have to be staging of trains as you described, so that, because only one train can pass at a time. But if it were double track, that's eliminated completely. As I said, you know, without respect to direction, 2 trains can pass anytime, unrestricted, with no interrelationship between the 2. So there wouldn't be that situation you describe, I don't think, if I understand your question correctly.
Yeah, that's right. We'll go 2 more and then we'll wrap this up. And then I'll just say this, after we wrap this up, I'll say thank you to you all from FEC and Brightline. I'll stay for a couple of minutes, we'll turn the cameras and everything off. And if any of you all want to have a discussion about this without them in the room, I'll be more than happy to have that discussion for a few minutes.
Chris Dempsey, Marine Industry Association of Treasure Coast. Are you going to make any provisions for commercial traffic if the bridges that, I mean, in the current state of the bridge, the single span, if you will, for the barges to lay up on, for the larger yachts, dolphin pilings, anything for them to stay secure while the extra trains are going?
Hasn't been any discussion about that, frankly. That's the first time that idea has ever been floated.
That's something that we strongly recommend that you guys bring up to the Coast Guard in the public hearings, because it has been discussed on both sides for many reasons, to find ways for you to stage because of the current and the situation of the large boats going through and barges going through. So there has been discussions with the Coast Guard about putting some kind of orders, some kind of pylons outside or even between the 2 bridges, you know, from time to time when, you know,
mentioned 4th of July and Memorial Day. There is road rage and there is water rage. So after everybody's been out partying all day on their boats and they come back and then the train bridge is down, once it goes up, they don't wait in line the way they're supposed to. They don't go the way that, is that a Coast Guard issue? I don't know who this issue is with, so I don't, it's just being kind, but we forget that a lot.
I think you're asking about, there's a red light under that bridge and somebody doesn't necessarily abide to the fact that there's a red light there, like at an intersection.
Once it goes up, everybody races to get in there, they don't wait their turn.
Yeah, it probably is a balance between local marine enforcement and Coast Guard. I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what that jurisdictional balance is between federal and state and local law enforcement for all of them enforcing a red light under the bridge or etiquette underneath the bridge waterways. But I will get you an answer to that. I'm happy to do so. So I will say, thank you to everybody. Nobody's trapped in this room. I want to thank everybody from FEC and Brightline to come back. As I said, I think they will probably come back again if we ask them to. I just ask that, my community has some questions for me without you guys in the room. I'm more than happy to answer them. And in that, thank you guys. I appreciate it. And if everybody doesn't have any questions, then you don't.